I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Alicia Mehta, Vice President of the IT Service Team and Everest Group and leads the Application Service Practice. She assists clients on topics related to digital transformation, application, modernization, automation, and related technologies. We have Samdeep Patadar, Senior Analyst, is a part of the Digital Service Team, currently tracking emerging technologies like blockchain, Web 3.0, Metaverse, and quantum computing. He has overseen multiple evaluations of prominent players in the blockchain and Web 3.0 space and collaborates with these stakeholders on various consulting projects. And last, we have Paru Shivandit, Practice Director on the Information Technology Service Team at Everest Group and leads the Digital Service Practice. She advises global service providers and enterprise in technology-related strategy decision-making on topics related to digital transformation and exponential technology like blockchain, Web 3.0, and Metaverse. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Alicia.
Thank you for the introductions, Gary. And really excited to be part of this webinar today. Thank you everybody for joining in. Let's move to slide 3. All right, so Metaverse, this technology as such evokes lots of doubts and thoughts amongst listeners and emotions as well. Excitement on one hand by some, disbelief by some others, promises of growth and fear of missing out on one hand, at the same time, worry of time and effort loss on the other. As business leaders, we believe it's very important to take an informed decision, whether it is worth taking the plunge or not, should be based upon facts and not feelings. And that is exactly what we'll try to do in this webinar today. Lay out the facts, our observations, predictions, and perspectives to help you understand this technology better, know your play in the ecosystem, and plan for a successful foray and expansion in the metaverse. The slide that you see here basically depicts just that. The perception of the metaverse lies at extreme ends. Complete optimism on one hand. Think about Meta, who's betting all of its future on metaverse. And on the other extreme is complete pessimism. And to be honest, there are more than few examples here who are more on the pessimistic side, and that's also increasing rapidly. And it includes some of the largest tech firms like Apple, who rolled back some of its investments in recent years. But keeping all of these confusions aside, and a lot of the others who lie somewhere in between, maybe it's good for some use cases, maybe for some industries, I don't really know where my play is. That's exactly what we'll try and declutter for you. But before we proceed into some of those nitty-gritties, let's take a stock of what some of our audience here think about Metaverse. Let's do a quick poll on the perception about Metaverse amongst the people that we have here. So what's your view on Metaverse? Where do you lie? You think Metaverse is overhyped and it will not live up to the expectations? You believe Metaverse is in early stages and it'll have potential in the near future. You believe it will revolutionize the way we interact, we conduct businesses online, everything. Or do you believe Metaverse is already here? We are living it already, and it has already begun to shape the way we interact and conduct businesses online. We're already seeing the results come in, and quite interesting. Keep responding. We have a few responses. Would love all of you to respond. Parul, what do you think? These are some interesting insights, as you see on the chart come up. What's your thoughts about these? Do you think it's in line with some of the market perception we have built? Is it a surprise? What do you think?
So Alicia, these are very interesting results. And like you said, right, there is complete optimism on one side, and then there are people who are really skeptics who are, who do not believe in the potential of that. I'm just trying to open the chat window. It has gone out for me. Just a second.
So majority of the respondents, 45% of the respondents believe that metaverse is in the early stages, the second option, and it will have tremendous potential in future. So what we are seeing is majority of the respondents here have a largely positive thought about metaverse, and they believe there is something for them, and it will have some great returns in the near future. A lesser proportion believes in the other two. Metaverse will revolutionize the way, or they believe metaverse is already here. Very small proportion, just 5% of our respondents think that it is overhyped and it will not live up to the expectations.
Yeah, Alisha, this is very interesting because the conversations that we are hearing in the market, right? There are a lot of instances where people say that it is overhyped, but it is a positive surprise that in this poll, we see that only 5% of the respondents are saying that they believe that the metaverse is overhyped. And a good 45%, close to half of the respondents believe that the metaverse has a tremendous potential in the coming future, right? So what will be the key message that we want the audience to take away from this session? So given the pace of technology disruption, it is imperative for the organizations to invest and experiment early on because the market is evolving rapidly and it will be difficult to catch up. There is no avoiding the fact that if you want to understand both the consumers and the opportunities that may be available to your organization, you need to be familiar with the metaverse. So irrespective of the fact that you are excited about the metaverse and believe that it will transform the business landscape, or you are a cynic and you think that it is merely a rebranded gaming platform of wider interest, this is the time to prepare and experiment. And you cannot do it on your own, right? Because this will require a complex interplay of technologies, platforms, capabilities, right? So you will have to bring an ecosystem of partners to help you realize this future dream of metaverse, right? So the key message is metaverse is evolving, but it is evolving fast. So for brands, businesses, institutions who are still on the fence, right, as to whether to adopt this technology or not, there is no better time than now. But how and where do you begin, right? So for this, we will have to understand what the metaverse is, right? Because there are more questions than answers as of now. So Sandeep, why don't you shed some more light and demystify the metaverse for us?
Thanks, Parul. So let me just start talking a little bit about what the metaverse actually is, right? In terms of, some of its building blocks and how it sort of evolved to the state that it is in today, as there still seems to be a lot of confusion in the market regarding this particular term. So very broadly speaking, the technologies companies refer to when they talk about the metaverse can kind of include virtual reality that's kind of characterized by these persistent virtual worlds that continue to exist even when you're not there, as well as augmented reality that kind of combines aspects of both the physical and the digital worlds. And also, just as an exercise to help you get a sense of how vague and complex this term, the metaverse can be. So mentally, if you sort of replace the word metaverse in a sentence with the word cyberspace, what you'll actually find is that 90% of the time, the meaning doesn't actually change, right? And that's because the term doesn't really refer to any one specific type of technology, but rather a more broad shift in how we sort of interact with the technology itself. Now coming to the evolution of the metaverse, right? And you can see some of the highlights in this slide over here. So it's sort of been shaped by several key milestones. So if you look at the very first part of the slide back in 2003, you had Second Life, which was sort of an early virtual world that kind of first pioneered the idea of a metaverse, which allowed users to create and interact with digital avatars. Then you had Bitcoin that kind of introduced this whole concept of a decentralized currency that laid the foundation of some of the, sort of the economic activity for these virtual worlds. You had things like NFTs that revolutionized the ways, sort of assets were owned and traded, and again, creating new opportunities for artists and creators. And finally, we also had the recent rebranding of Facebook to Meta, and that's what sort of brought this term metaverse into the public consciousness as well, right? And created all of this hype and activity around the term as we know it today. So if we can just move to the next slide. So the other thing you sort of need to know in terms of some of the building blocks of the metaverse. So as you can see, we have about 6 building blocks over here that largely covers most of the technologies and functionalities that the metaverse sort of needs to get right, right? So to start with, we have one of the most important blocks, and that's the use case block, the use case and the applications block. And this is where your end users will actually consume and leverage some of the services offered in the metaverse ecosystem. So here again, the metaverse will need a wide variety of applications and use cases that kind of provides real world value and actually to kind of attract and retain users as a business, right? And for you as a business, a way to enable those use cases again becomes extremely important. The other sort of important building block over here, you can probably see on the slide, is platforms and access. And again, something that's extremely sort of key over here is that, you know, the platforms need to be able to support a large number of users, and the cost of sort of the entry must be low enough that people can actually participate, right? So again, ultimately, the sort of choice for you as a business over here depends on, you know, sort of what's the state of the ecosystem and what's your specific line of business, right? So, you know, but ultimately what we've seen is that, you know, we sort of envision this single interoperable platform compared to sort of the internet of today, where you'll kind of be able to seamlessly transition between these different metaverse worlds. Apart from that, you can also see the development and creator block over here. So again, another very crucial aspect of the metaverse is in terms of some of the tools and APIs that is sort of needed to enable your developers and creators to kind of build and customize some of these experiences. So these include things like tools for 3D modeling, animation, scripting that kind of enable the creation of these metaverse use cases, right? And here again, the key would be to sort of hire the right talent, and building out the right capabilities is something that would sort of be very important over here. And finally, also to throw a little bit of light on some of the foundational and sort of infrastructure blocks, building blocks of the metaverse, things like, you know, your servers, your databases, your networks. So the key thing again here being that the infrastructure needs to be able to support a massive amount of data and traffic, and it needs to be highly reliable and secure. So that was just a quick sort of overview of the metaverse and some of its building blocks. So now we also wanted to give you a sense of, you know, where we are currently in the metaverse story, and what are some of the key things that you can sort of expect in the near term. So Parul, do you sort of want to quickly talk about that?
Yes, Sandeep. Yes. So we all noticed, right? The concept of metaverse, it gained a lot of attention and hype in the recent years. Fueled in partly by large tech giants like Facebook changing their name to Meta, or the success of virtual worlds like Second Life and video games like Fortnite, right? So where is this hype heading, right? Is there some substance in metaverse, or is it just plain hype? So in recent months, there has been some skepticism about the concept of metaverse, and there are questions like, is metaverse truly feasible, or is it even desirable, right? The hype is settling down, and we saw a decline of around 80% in the Google searches for metaverse as compared to the 2022 beginning. But if we notice, this has always been the case since the dawn of the internet, and indeed all the technological innovation. We go through periods of heightened excitement and hype about what is possible. And if we think of the early days of the internet, right, it is worth remembering that the burst of the first dot-com bubble, right, it resulted into disappearance of a number of companies. But if you think about the internet itself, it became omnipresent, right? So just as the internet evolved beyond simple websites, and today it underpins majority of the businesses, it would be incorrect to underestimate the potential of metaverse too, right? So the key takeaway is that metaverse, it is still very much a developing concept. And while some people may be becoming more skeptical of the idea, there are still many investors and entrepreneurs who are betting big on its potential. And we are likely to see continued innovation and experimentation in this space in the years to come. Now, when I talk of the investments, let's try to understand the level of investments that have been happening in the metaverse by different companies, right? So large tech companies, venture capitalists, and other organizations, they are developing solutions and putting billions of dollars into every corner of metaverse, be it infrastructure, be it platforms, services, right? Now, the investment in new technology does not necessarily guarantee their eventual success. However, it does underscore the extent to which these companies believe in the potential of metaverse. And it gives us an idea that they have evaluated this opportunity and they conclude that it is worth pursuing, right? So to put things in perspective, Facebook has spent around $25 billion in the last 2 years on Meta Reality Labs. And they have said that they will invest meaningfully more in 2023, and they are going to sustain that over the years. What does this mean? This means that Facebook will spend around $250 billion over the next 10 to 12 years on the metaverse. And this is a huge amount. To put this in perspective, let's put it in context of other major leaps in humanity in terms of investments. So on the top, on the left-hand side, right, you see what Apple spent in its entirety to create the first iPhone. Gary, we can remain on the, yeah. So which is $3.6 billion. And similarly for the atom bomb, the first atom bomb creation, we spent around $23 billion. Thinking of Tesla, which has the dream of putting electric cars and revolutionizing the transport market, they have spent around $40 million, right? So it means that what Facebook has invested in Meta, it overshadows every other technological innovation and investment. And this is only comparable to the Apollo program, which is putting the man on the moon. And that involved around 13 years of building rockets and entire infrastructure and capability to land on the moon and get back, right? So the key takeaway from this slide is that the tech companies are putting in a lot at stake to realize the future of the metaverse. And other companies are also not far behind. So if we move on, we see that on the next slide. Yes, so we see that a lot of other tech companies are also investing in metaverse. There are a slew of companies who have committed time and money to build virtual reality environments, and they are investing in different projects and initiatives. And we notice that large technology companies are the biggest investors, and to a much greater extent than they were for artificial intelligence at a similar stage in its evolution, where metaverse is at right now, right? So Microsoft, they acquired a gaming company called Activision and in January 2022, which is at the time the priciest tech acquisition the gaming industry has ever seen, right? Apart from this, we talked about the investments of Facebook. There are different other players also. So for example, Epic Games, which is famous for being the company behind the game Fortnite, right? One of the most popular games of all time, which surpassed 1 million players within 24 hours of its release. So they have invested around 800 millions. So Silicon Valley is betting big on metaverse, despite any short-term hypes, ups and downs, failures and learnings that come as a part of the experimentation with any new technology and technological innovation, right? So Alisha, we are also seeing a lot happening around metaverse in APAC. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was tracking the APAC market with respect to developments in metaverse, and it's very interesting, right? While in rest of the world, we see, as we were discussing, pessimism as well as optimism, mix of feelings about metaverse. APAC seems to be largely positive about what they think how metaverse will pan out to be. We could, I believe it could turn out to be the next dark horse in this race amongst all the other geographies. Reason being, there is meaningfully large amount of funds being allocated for investments in metaverse in APAC by APAC investors. Enterprises at the same time seems to be going strong on technology and making talent, R&D investments, all of that. So there's huge amount of investments that are happening in APAC. And as I try to uncover what could be the main reason why APAC seems to be more optimistic and more positive about it, one of the possible reasons for this encouraging thought process about metaverse probably stems from the fact that APAC is the largest market for gaming industry. And this industry, as you mentioned, Parul, a while ago as well, is at the forefront of metaverse adoption, right? And there's a lot going on in the gaming industry when it comes to metaverse. You talked about Epic Games. There are all the other gaming organizations and all the other non-gaming organizations which are trying to gamify a lot of interactions with their customers, with their employees, with their partners, etc. So there's a lot of investment that is going on in the APAC market around metaverse. So that is one of the key drivers for APAC market. But before we proceed, while we talked about APAC, we talked about global markets. Let's try and see what does it mean, from our audience here. What do they believe are the top drivers for growth in metaverse, right? What are some of the reasons? Is it purely a technological drive that is pushing metaverse? Is it purely technology that's enabling this immersive, interactive experience? Something that is very pertinent for a gaming industry, and that is the solution that Generation Z really needed? Or is it a behavioral change that has set in with the pandemic, where users are now more adept to visual engagement and conversation and virtual interaction, etc.? Or is it certain industries and operating principles of those industries, such as gaming, that is the key driver for growth and will continue to be the key driver for growth for something like metaverse? Or is it more around the enabling technologies or enabling capabilities like infrastructure, network, or lastly, blockchain? Sandeep talked about blockchain. Is that something that is really the need of the hour to push metaverse adoption? So let's see what the results say. All right, so we're getting quite a few interesting results here. What do you think, Parul, so far? Let's put the results aside, but of these, is there something, if you have to select just one, while here we are saying select all that apply, but for you, what is that one thing that matters most? What do you think is the key reason? I'll tell you, for me, I think it's the second one. It's the behavioral change, because any technology is not just a technology addition in our lives, it's also a behavioral change, and specifically metaverse. It requires a lot of behavioral change. So I believe it's the second one, where there's a growing demand of social and entertainment experience in a digital environment that's really pushing for adoption of metaverse and will continue to push adoption. How about you? What's the top of priority?
Yes, Alisha, I agree with you that there is a change in how the consumers are behaving, and there is a lot of driving force behind the gaming industry, as well as the Gen Z, who likes to be in immersive environments and they focus a lot on experience. But apart from this, one other factor which I think which is driving the growth for metaverse is the growth in the technology itself. So 5G and the computing is also growing, and we are also seeing growth in the blockchain and Web3 applications, right? So I believe this is also one of the significant drivers that will drive the metaverse in the coming future, according to me.
Right, yeah. Right. What about you, Sandeep? Of these, if you have to select one, what is the key driver for growth?
So from what I can see from the responses over here, at least, is that most of the people think all of the above kind of applies, right? Most of them are kind of in that 50 plus 10 plus minus 10 range. But that's also sort of in alignment with kind of what we expected as well. So sort of if you can just go to the next slide over here, Carrie. Yeah, so let me also just quickly, kind of share some of our perspectives over here and some of the key growth drivers that we see in the metaverse. So from our perspective, the very first thing I'd like to say is that, first of all, we see that there's a very long way to go, but we also see a lot of promise in the metaverse, and there are sort of these key developments and trends in the market that is playing a very important role in terms of, getting us closer to a future where the metaverse sort of becomes a extremely sort of crucial technology. So from a growth drivers perspective, first of all, it's the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So COVID-19 has sort of permanently changed the way, people do everything, and whether it's working, whether it's learning, whether it's socializing, and it sort of also accelerated the adoption of some of these virtual technologies. And that sort of behavioral shift is something that we see is likely to continue as, people become more comfortable with some of these virtual experiences and kind of expect more of these immersive and interactive experiences. And that's something we're seeing reflected in the market as well. So the use of, some of these digital channels has increased by 20 to 20% across many industries. And we're also expecting this trend to continue. The use of things like virtual classrooms and online learning platforms have also sort of increased dramatically during the COVID-19 pandemic, with some of these platforms actually sort of reporting an increase in usage of over 400%, right? The other sort of key growth driver we see is gaming and entertainment, and sort of this is where we also see most of the activity in the market as well. So 66% of the global gamers play games online, and the average gamer spends about 7 hours a week playing games, and all of these numbers are kind of extremely up compared to what it used to be, right? So and apart from that, even from a hardware perspective, especially when it comes to VR, AR hardware, right? So the virtual reality headset market is kind of expected to ship about 2 to 3 times the number of units compared to last year as well. And finally, we also come to what we feel is very crucial, is sort of the increasing maturity of some of these building block technologies as well. So again, as sort of the underlying technologies that power the metaverse sort of continue to mature, it's sort of likely that we'll see, more innovative, more engaging virtual experience as well. And we'll also sort of, from a blockchain perspective, we'll also see kind of enterprise blockchain projects integrated with, existing IT systems in the next few years. The use of, VR and AR in some of these industries like manufacturing, healthcare, retail is also something that we'll expect will sort of significantly increase in the coming years as well. So just if you can move on to the next slide, yeah. So let me also give you a quick sense of the current state of the metaverse evolution and how we sort of see things playing out in the future as well, right? So what we see is we mainly see the adoption of the metaverse as something that's going to be very, very evolutionary rather than revolutionary, and it's going to be very, very iterative. So most enterprises are still sort of in that exploratory phase of the metaverse, right? While there are sort of some of these early adopters who are experimenting with some of these metaverse technologies, the vast majority of enterprises are still kind of trying to understand, how they can best utilize some of these tools in their operations. So in this slide over here, what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of chart a potential path in terms of, how enterprises would sort of mature in their metaverse journeys, right? And what we're essentially seeing is that as the metaverse evolves, we'll also see an increased level of impact in terms of ROI for enterprises. So as you can see over here, we sort of start at the process level or the business unit level, which is where most enterprises are still at today. Like I was mentioning earlier, we see that, metaverse use cases over here will largely be focused around something like immersive experience delivery, right? For example, at a process level, companies may sort of use, VR and AR reality for virtual demonstrations or trade shows. And at a business level, they could also be something like training and development, conducting remote meetings, collaboration, sort of all of these use cases that kind of enable improving customer engagement through immersive experiences. But from our perception, so as the technology sort of matures and sort of evolves with time, we'll increasingly sort of see the metaverse having significant impact at the enterprise level from a strategic perspective as well, right? So for example, companies could use the metaverse to improve their supply chain management logistics, such as by using, something like digital twins to monitor and optimize the warehouses and the distribution centers. The metaverse could also be a key enabler in terms of broader, sort of enterprise strategic goals like sustainability as well, due to the efficiency gains that's sort of realized by doing things in a simulated world. So again, the key sort of question that again pop up in your mind would be, how can I sort of leverage the metaverse and get to that place where it can have a strategic impact on my business? So Alisha, do you want to share some of your perspectives on that?
Yes, absolutely. And very well said, Sandeep. The reason why, all of this that we just discussed, right? There is a lot of hype, there is a lot of confusion. People are not sure if it is for them, if it is not for them. A lot of it is stemming from the fact that Metaverse right now is being thought of as just an add-on to enhance what they're already doing. It is not being used at an enterprise level to actually impact from a strategic standpoint, to make movements which impact the entire organization, their ecosystem in a meaningfully large way. And that's where the gap between reality versus expectations of today lies for Metaverse. But as we proceed, as the advancements in Metaverse technology, the comfort for enterprises to adopt the technology, all of that happens, is where we expect enterprises to start moving up that ladder to really think of Metaverse as an impact, as a strategic impact, a strategic lever to create impact at an enterprise level. And as we get into that, I think it's a good time to discuss what does it mean for business leaders? What does it mean for them from a investment standpoint, from an approach standpoint? But before we share our perspectives, let's again take a quick poll of the audience here, from the audience here, to understand where they lie right now. How ready do they believe their organizational capabilities are for Metaverse? So, the poll is open for everybody to answer. How ready do you think you are for Metaverse? Are you still familiarizing yourself with the concept of Metaverse and conducting some initial research, some R&D, etc.? Have you already started developing strategy and investing in dedicated team to explore the potential applications and opportunities that Metaverse has to offer? A lot of our enterprises that we actually speak to has been implementing in pilot projects and POCs to test and validate some of the use cases, which is quite encouraging. Or are you at the stage where you've already identified the use cases and now you're trying to integrate the Metaverse related capabilities into your core business operations? Or are you one of those who have already well-established Metaverse presence and capabilities? I'll be very keen to speak to some of you and learn what were your best practices and your learnings in this journey. So let's see what the poll says. Maybe we can get a few more responses. We have received a few. Would love a few more of you to respond. Where do you think you are? All right. Any more responses? I think what we have received is somewhat in line with what we expected. For majority of the respondents, almost 60% of the respondents, we see the first option being selected. You're familiarizing yourself with the concept of Metaverse and you're conducting some initial research. That's where we see majority of the business leaders lying, majority of the decision-making line of is Metaverse for us? Is this something that we should be venturing in? What are the use cases we should be focusing on? How can we create that ecosystem of capabilities, an ecosystem of partners and talent and all the technology assets that needs to be invested in? So great. Let's then try and address what that means. This roadmap that we talked about. What does it mean for business leaders? So we believe there are 4 key dimensions of capabilities that as a business leader, you'll need to be thinking of. And there could be more depending upon your individual context, depending upon your specific industry. And we'll be happy to have one-on-one conversation to get into those details. But for now, the 4 key pillars of success for Metaverse are use cases, where it applies. It needs to be something that meaningfully alters the experience, meaningfully delivers an enhanced experience rather than replicating the real world experience into a virtual space. So that's one of the very important things. The second is the talent to do this. I think over the past 2 to 3 years, nobody has been away from the issues that the world is facing from a talent standpoint, technology talent, well-trained domain experts, everything. So the talent remains a big issue when we talk about Metaverse, and considering so many building blocks, you require capabilities at a very, very wide level. The third is ecosystem. Nobody can do it alone. You obviously need support of hyperscalers, the platform providers, the data providers, governance, organizational bodies. all of those would need to come together to enable that ecosystem of metaverse for it to actually impact at a strategic level, at an enterprise level. And finally, it's the services, right? You need to put together capabilities, you need to integrate it with your core operations and a lot more. So let's deep dive into each of these very quickly. Sandeep, would you want to talk about the use cases that we are seeing right now emerge in the metaverse space? And I think we also have certain questions on the same. So I hope some of them will get attended as well.
Yeah, sure, Alicia. So as Alicia rightly sort of pointed out from a use case perspective, it's extremely sort of important for you as an enterprise to identify those, sort of short-term and near-term use cases. So from our perspective, the immediate sort of use cases of the metaverse fall into two main categories. So there'll be customer and partner related and employee related. And these are use cases that are mostly, again, oriented in the first category of process level impact that I mentioned earlier, and sort of are some of the best use cases that you can sort of start out with, right? And for customer and partners, so these could sort of be things like virtual stores and marketplaces, where customers and partners can kind of browse and purchase products in a fully immersive environment. Enterprises can also use the metaverse to provide customer support, allowing customers to interact with live agents who can answer questions, provide product recommendations, even sort of complete transactions. From an employee perspective, the metaverse is being used to create a fully sort of immersive and training educational experiences, including things like interactive simulations, gaming training modules, and personalized learning paths, right? And we've also seen the metaverse increasingly be used in collaboration as well, where teams sort of can work together in a fully immersive environment, kind of sharing information, collaborating on projects, accessing, real-time data and analytics, right? And we've also seen use cases around virtual offices, allowing employees to work remotely while still sort of feeling connected to their colleagues. And this is something that Facebook has also implemented, at least at a very high executive level. So overall, if you want to get started on your metaverse journey, these are sort of some of the immediate use cases that you can sort of focus on to make a start.
Great, thank you for that, Sandeep. Then now let's also talk about talent. The talent war is something we are all living in. What kind of talent does enabling metaverse really requires?
So as sort of the metaverse becomes, evolves and sort of increasingly becomes more complex, it, as you rightly pointed out, requires a diverse set of talent and skill sets to build and maintain it. For instance, it requires talented developers, designers, artists, writers, and many other types of sort of skill sets to create the virtual environment, the characters, the experiences that the users actually interact with, right? So again, it's not only just sort of on the interactive aspect of it, it will also require specialized skills in terms of cybersecurity to ensure that it's secure and safe for users. It also needs people with experience in data analytics, machine learning, and other areas of technologies to kind of help make sense of some of the vast amounts of data that are kind of being generated by some of these interactions, right? So from a technology perspective, we've listed some of the key skills we currently feel are important for building out the metaverse. And I've also kind of highlighted the demand supply gap that exists in each of them, right? And this will again give you a perspective on what kind of capability you need to build in your organization to kind of take full advantage of the metaverse. So again, overall, from a talent perspective, again, we feel this is sort of the right time to start building out your capabilities and hiring and incubating those key skills that will increasingly start becoming relevant for the metaverse.
Yeah. And clearly these are not all, right? There would be a whole lot of other capabilities that would be required, just from being able to integrate the metaverse, being able to govern it, test it, enable it as part of the ecosystem. But of course, these seem to be the key skills from a huge demand supply gap standpoint that needs to be solved for before enterprises actually embark on this journey to make sure they do not hit a wall when it comes to scaling their initiatives. Great. So we talked about use cases, we talked about talent. Parul, what's your thought about the ecosystem? What are some of the other players that are required to enable metaverse?
Yes, Arisha. So as we discussed in the beginning of the conversation today, and Sandeep talked about the different building blocks of Metaverse, there are a number of organizations and also startups which will play a very important role in providing all these capabilities, right? And since these technologies are evolving and maturing, this ecosystem of partners will also change, right, as this technology matures. So, for example, when we talk about the infrastructure required for enabling Metaverse, the hyperscalers with their vast resources and expertise in managing large distributed systems are well positioned to provide the necessary computing power, the data storage that we will need, and also the networking capabilities. Similarly, the independent software vendors, right, like Oracle, SAP, etc., they will also play a role with respect to creating and delivering the software applications and services. And they will also play a role in creating and designing these virtual environments. Now, one important thing to note is that these large technology companies, they are a little bit behind when it comes to the niche players and the startups, right, in terms of their metaverse strategy and offerings. But we believe that as these technology mature, we will see a clear messaging and offerings around metaverse from these large players as well. And there are a few other components as well, right? So when it comes to consulting, IT services, design, many large service providers and even consulting players have built a separate metaverse practice, right? And we believe that the others will not be far behind, and they will also uplift their offerings around metaverse. Another important aspect will be the blockchain and the Web3 startups and tech providers. So Metaverse relies on a digital economy where users can buy, sell, and trade virtual goods and services, right? So these Web3 and blockchain tech providers will also play a very important role in this ecosystem, right? So the key takeaway is that there is a complex interconnection of technologies and platforms, right, that will be required to build an ecosystem to enable the metaverse. And all these building blocks are maturing. So, for example, the cloud and edge computing capabilities that can power the metaverse are still to be there, right? The hardware devices that we have today, they are not very user friendly. So even we need some more maturing in there as well. So this whole ecosystem is maturing, Alisha.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does look like quite a complex ecosystem, as it would be expected from a complex technology like Metaverse. I see this one specific segment that talks about design, consulting, IT services providers. I think that's going to be a very important segment to enable all of these different players to come together and provide all of these services. So Parul, can you throw some more light on the services aspect of what are the services enterprises would require?
Right. So the organizations and enterprises, they will have to evaluate their service providers so that they can orchestrate and enable the metaverse journey of these organizations, right? And when you think about these service providers, you have to consider 4 important points. So firstly, consider the service providers that have invested in ready-to-use adoption templates and use cases across technologies like digital twin, AR, VR, payments, etc., right? Because this is a very complex space. And the service provider that you choose should be able to accelerate and push you to realize the proof of concepts and can accelerate your metaverse adoption. The second thing to consider is whether the service provider has techno-creative thinkers on their team, apart from the core tech skills that Sandeep mentioned, right? So as we talked about the use cases also, the customer and employee experience are 2 important use cases. And to design those immersive user experience and to foster a sense of community, right? The service providers should invest in hiring storytellers, creatives, right? Because it will be very important for driving the engagement and differentiating in a virtual environment. Now, coming to the ecosystem part, we have already discussed how important it is. One thing which I would want to note here is that service providers should show a vision and investment to move beyond the immediate tech partners that are present already and orchestrate an innovative ecosystem. And finally, it would be good if the service provider also has a lab as a service offering, because it would be easier for you to simulate and experiment without spending so much money for building the infrastructure and the platform to start your journey into the metaverse and experiment and, kind of test your initiatives. So these are 4 important criteria to be kept in mind. And I think this brings us to the conclusion of the webinar. And I would like to summarize and talk about the best practices for the organizations when they begin their metaverse exploration journey. Moving to the next slide. Yeah. So as the enterprises begin their metaverse journey, the first step for you would be to contextualize your metaverse adoption for your business environment, right? You should start by considering the specific needs and goals for your organization. So companies have various ways they can participate in and capitalize on metaverse, right? Starting from building experiences to facilitating interaction and enabling infrastructure, right? So defining your metaverse ambition and keeping your business environment and priorities in mind is the first step for your metaverse journey. The second is building an ecosystem that can help you leverage the technology and service providers to build your proof of concepts and experiment without making huge investments into building infrastructure and platform. Next would be to hire and develop talent with the required skills, right? As we already discussed and Sandeep talked about the demand and supply gap when it comes to the relevant skills for the metaverse. So this will be one of the differentiating factor, right? Now, metaverse is in its infancy and it would be important to encourage the adoption, to build a community and to create a strong user base. So the next step would be to set up a governance, to establish standards, best practices. This will ensure that the technology is being used safely and ethically, and so that we are able to prevent the potential risks and build a trust among the stakeholders and users, right? And finally, to set pragmatic and reasonable expectations, because this technology is still evolving and there will be bumps in the road. So this will also help you to assess whether the technology is a good fit for your context, and also to understand the level of investments that are required in terms of time, money, and expertise. So these are the 5 best practices for the organizations while starting their metaverse journey. So now we come to the Q&A. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you for summarizing, Parul. We do have a lot of questions that we have received as part of the discussion. Also, we received a couple of questions before the start of the webinar during the registration itself. So we have 10 minutes. Let's pick up some of the questions. Sandeep, would you want to start with one of them?
Yeah, sure. So this is a question I think we received before the webinar. So the question is, what are some of the industries and geographies that are going to be affected most by the metaverse, right? So to answer that, the most sort of obvious one would be gaming and entertainment, and that's why we've seen a lot of impact in recent history as well. So the gaming industry is sort of expected to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of the metaverse. It will lead to the creation of new gaming experiences that are more immersive and interactive. And the metaverse could also have the same amount of impact on the entertainment industry as well, right? In terms of providing new opportunities for creators to kind of showcase their work in virtual spaces. Apart from that, we can also see an impact from the manufacturing side of things, as product development and prototyping becomes a lot easier when you can do it in a virtual world, or you can do it in the metaverse, and the efficiency gains are again very, very important over here as well, right? We also see, in terms of some of your traditional industries, we see getting impacted is something like real estate, right? The metaverse could again completely transform the way you sort of think about real estate itself, right? Creating new opportunities for virtual property ownership and development. And we've all seen those news articles on some piece of virtual land in the metaverse being sold for millions of dollars. So that's also a space where we can sort of see a significant impact. Something like retail is also an area where we can see impact in terms of having virtual storefronts and virtual product demos, providing, essentially consumers a new way to kind of shop and interact with brands. So those are just a couple of, immediate industries we see getting impacted. But again, we sort of feel the impact of the metaverse will be far-reaching and wide. It's just a matter of time to get there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just to add to that, Sandeep, and I think there were a couple of questions around how would it impact the services industry. Just yesterday, I came across news where it said that Colombian High Court held a lawsuit discussion in the metaverse. Now we can debate if that was the right thing to do or not, but what it did enable was a lot of people who wanted to listen in, who are generally there as an audience, but cannot be there every time in the physical setup. It gave this huge opportunity to them to be able to experience the live setup in a virtual ecosystem. So what does it mean, from a services industry or an asset heavy industry or anything? Ultimately, metaverse needs to be an enabler of experience delivery in a different manner. Again, I said this during the session as well, replicating the experience that you are delivering in the physical world, the same experience being delivered in metaverse may not really be the right decision to take. What needs to be thought of is, what is it that is not possible within the realms of physical world due to, limitations of space, limitations of, people having to travel and all of that, and thinking about those use cases in the metaverse context, or thinking about advanced use cases which were otherwise not possible in the physical world. So you think about, I think Samsung store in US created a metaverse version of itself, where it enabled users to gamify certain situations, enabling them to collect tokens, enabling them to collect points, and thereby increase purchase. So it's not just experience delivery, but it's also business impact on the enterprise. So net story is that metaverse needs to be thought of differently because it's a different technology. It's not just it's not just a virtual engagement. It's a different experience delivery. So it needs to be thought of with a very different kind of a lens. All right. Next question, Sandeep.
Yeah, so I can also see another question over here from Akash in the live chat. So his question is essentially, how soon do you see the metaverse and ChatGPT working hand in hand, and when do you see the form factor improving? Okay, so to sort of answer that question, I'll take the second half of that question first, right? So if you look at when you see the form factor improving, if you look just, if like we sort of mentioned in the previous parts of the presentation, there's a lot of investment, there's heavy investment in this space, right? So Parul sort of compared the investment that's being made into space to something like the Apollo program, and sort of being 10, 15 times the amount of money that's being invested in the iPhone, for instance. So it's very clear that, we'll sort of definitely see significant sort of improvements in the hardware, at least within 5 to 10 years, right? And that's sort of in terms of tracking the growth for the past 7 or 8 years since sort of VR has been introduced as well, in terms of the advances that have been made in terms of optics, in terms of field of view, in terms of the detail of the models, the quality, the hardware getting smaller and things like that. That's something that's definitely something that we feel is reasonable to expect. And to address the first half of your question in terms of how soon do you see Metaverse and ChatGPT working hand in hand? So from that perspective, ChatGPT has definitely been something very interesting, and definitely sort of been somewhat of a breakthrough in sort of AI as well. So if you look at most of the Metaverse use cases that sort of exist today, most of it is kind of focused on user to user collaboration. The fact that Meta is the one that's pouring in a lot of money into it as well is why you sort of see a lot of the social to social interaction, people to people interaction. But it's definitely possible that, ChatGPT and AI sort of changes that model a little bit, bringing in more of an element of you being able to sort of interact with AI as well as sort of people, and it's kind of becoming an amalgamation of the both. So it's definitely a very interesting thing, and we'll be looking forward to see what happens with that as well. Alicia, do you want to answer any more questions? Yeah.
Sure. So some of the other questions which we have around use cases, etc., and there are quite a few, so I'm not going to them line by line, but just trying to put together our perspective, our thought process. From a metaverse standpoint, I think it's going to be not just about, like I said, not just about experience, but think of it as just breaking it down into pieces, the way you think about, say, creating a digital twin of an asset. So it's about asset twin, it's about people twin, it's about process twin. So now putting the same thought process in metaverse as well, metaverse for people, metaverse for process, or metaverse for certain assets, for sale of assets, for interaction with those assets, etc. That is how I'll put a lot of questions that have been asked here into that perspective of how does it impact industrial procurement? How does it impact services industry? What are the B2B examples for services industry? Think of it as various processes that a services industry engages in, apart from, of course, training and development. There is also onboarding, there is engagement, meetings with the clients, there is collaboration, working together for the achievement of the end product, the business, IT teams coming together, all of that. The collaboration, which till a couple of years ago was thought of as something that has to happen on-premise. There is no other way to do it. It has to be co-located. But the pandemic definitely changed the way people perceive some of those ways of working. And Metaverse is only going to enhance those capabilities further, while it can be done from where you are and what time you're comfortable with, still enabling people to come together in a way that it enables better interaction, it enables better collaboration and faster achievement of outcomes. So that's about, people twin. Process twin is, say, from an industrial procurement standpoint, understanding how things are moving from one to the other, what are the gaps that exist, how can it be improved, so that collaborative, again, it falls back, it's all about people, right? Ultimately, it's about people. So everybody coming together to think of where are the improvements that could be made, where are the gaps that exist, how things can be improved, what new processes could be added, and so on and so forth. So I would urge everybody, as they're trying to identify use cases and solve for where Metaverse works for us, think of from these three lenses: asset, people, and process. That will really give a lot of different ideas. And feel free to reach out to us if there are questions specific to any industry or any process within the industry where you believe you would want a brainstorming partner to identify a specific use case. All right, we have a last minute. I think we'll not be able to take any more questions from here. But what we wanted to also let you know of is there's a lot of research that we've been doing on Metaverse, and this is just a very high-level glimpse of some of our observations from the past few months of research. Feel free to reach out to us directly or go through some of our blogs on Everest Group website, some of the reports that are already published there. And like I said, if there are any questions, feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to have a conversation, share more thoughts, explore possibilities together in any way that we can help you. That's all from our side. Thank you so much for joining the webinar.